Okay, guys, so forgive my two things. One, my hillbilly setup. I've been trying to figure this problem out for ages now. I'm sure a lot of you guys have had this. You get a 6.2 or 6.5 GM, Detroit, whatever, AM General, whatever flavor of 6.2, 6.5 IDI, and been sitting for a long time with the fuel, nasty old fuel in it, and it gets gummed up and then the pump's stuck. I finally got a way to unstick them. This is the first time I've ever gotten one of these to unstick, and it, knock on wood, it seemed pretty flawless. So it took a while, and it's a hillbilly rig setup. And also forgive me for I recorded it as I was doing it because I didn't even think it was going to work, but it did. It, like I said, worked beautifully. So here's what I got. So first thing I did, and you'll see in the kind of hodgepodge videos I'll add on after this, and you'll kind of get each section of what I did and kind of see what was going on. But this is the first part is recorded after the fact. So I pulled the cap off the injection pump. All the linkages were stuck. I kind of moved them around my fingers and got them cleaned out a little bit, but still everything was stuck internally. No fuel whatsoever to any of the injectors. It just wasn't moving any fuel, wasn't letting any fuel into the pump. Everything was just stuck. I was told the fuel was 2+ years old. Well, I think it was 15+ years old. Fuel was some of the nastiest stuff ever. It was starting to turn into a solid in the tank. I drained the tank completely, got all the old fuel out of the system, and then I hooked up an electric. I would have preferred a pump with a higher pressure, but I used this Carter. It's like a off-the-shelf electric fuel, 12-volt electric fuel pump. It's meant for carburetors, so it's probably 7 or 8 psi max. You get them from Napa or whatever. Those little the little farm and garden ones that you see on like lawnmowers sometimes would work. Anything to push 7-ish psi of fuel. It's not rated for diesel, I don't think, but I sure as heck can use it for it. I use it for transferring fuel or running stuff on a stand when I need to and testing things, so I wasn't worried about it lasting. I literally just hooked some tubing I had up to it. Let me get the cap on it before it all evaporates. But I had a can of denatured alcohol that I used and a jug of fresh clean diesel. So I started by, took the top off, and you'll see this in the later sections. I took the top off. I got all that fuel out, everything I could. It'd be better to use a fluid extractor, which I have, but mine broke, so I just blew it out with air, and it's all over the paint and everything. But there's a beat up old Hummer, so it doesn't matter. If you had a pickup truck with that nice paint and stuff, you probably wouldn't want all that all over everything. Plus it makes it a little more of a fire hazard. So yeah, probably don't do that. Suck it out or get it out. Don't put a bunch of rags or towels in there. You're going to get crap in there. The biggest thing is don't put more crud into that pump than's already in it. Okay, so did that, pulled the top off, got all the fuel out. I poured denatured alcohol into the top of the pump. Then I hooked up the electric pump with the denatured alcohol, pushing it into the pump. And then I got a high speed, low drag. This is the fancy heat gun from Harbor Freight. They have like a cheap one. This is like the more expensive one. And I brought it up here. My fat ass getting up here. I brought it up here, so this would be removed, and I tried putting it back here on the inlet of the pump, because that's where most of the gum's gonna be from the fuel inlet. But there's this rubber around it, and it was melting that rubber, and I didn't like that. So what I did was I put it up here. Everything's blazing hot. So I put it up here and got it away from all the electrical components and blew it right on the body of the pump to heat that pump up. And as you start heating it up, and again, you'll see it, some of it in the later videos. I don't have fancy recording equipment, so some of it's going to be kind of trash, but you'll get the idea, and when you go to do it, you'll see. So heated the pump up, and as I'm heating the pump up, you'll see it start to bubble inside of the pump. Don't use an open flame for this because you're guaranteed to burn it down. It's already a fire hazard as it is. So, I mean, have a fire extinguisher ready. You know, make sure you don't have a bunch of rags and stuff under there. You know, really do your damnedest not to burn your garage or your rig down. And so I heated the body of the pump up while pumping with the electric fuel pump into it. The reason why I went with the electric was because I wanted it to force fuel into it while it's sitting. There's stuff in the pump that won't really allow it to go in unless the pump is turning, but it does let a little bit in, and it rams it right up against the inlet of the pump. And any little bit that gets through is good, because you want that denatured alcohol to start busting down that that crap, and that you'll start to see it float to the top. It'll look like little brown, almost like caramel brown flakes, like really, really thin but wide, like snowflakes of this brown caramel colored stuff. And that's the crap that's getting into the pump and gumming the pump up. So I got it heat cycled a bunch of times. It really wasn't taking much in. I'd blow it out, suck the crap out, put more denatured alcohol in, and then once it started really flowing into the pump, granted it's still not a whole lot because it's not turning, I knew that I had gotten at least some of the obstruction out. So then I went and I started cranking it. It's a lot easier with this because it's a Hummer. I can crank it while watching. I can just reach over the windshield and turn the crank while watching down into the pump. And as soon as I started cranking it the couple times, it really kicked a whole bunch of that crud up in there and really started flowing denatured alcohol into the system. I did not want to pressurize, and this is all done with all the injector lines undone at the injectors. I really didn't want to get a full injection compression on the denatured alcohol as much as I could, because it would, in theory, wipe out the pump. You don't want, it'd be the same thing as like running gasoline through it and pressurize it. It'll screw it up. So my hope is that doing it with everything disconnected, it would just kind of just be moving it through and not actually trying to compress it. And that seems like it worked. It really didn't seem like it damaged the pump at all. So again, top hat's still off. Injectors are all undone. It's moving the denatured alcohol and stuff into the pump, which that pump was cooking hot. It was, I mean, probably 200 and some odd degrees. I didn't want to go much hotter than that because I didn't want to smoke any of the seals in it. But with the engine running, my goal was to get it to full operating temp with the engine running like you were going up a hill or something. So 200, maybe 300 degrees tops. So anyways, pump's hot, got it to where it started moving. I saw it moving fluid through to the injectors, so I knew I was moving, and I didn't have any of that before, so I knew I was making progress then. So I cleaned the pump out again, hooked it up with diesel, running diesel into it, and then cranked it a bunch and let that electric fuel pump push as much, try to get all the alcohol out of the pump as possible. And once that alcohol, I got as much of the alcohol out of the pump as I could, I hooked all the injector lines up, cranked it a bunch, and it really got gross inside that pump. And I saw the clear fuel line on my electric pump. You could see it all of a sudden go whoosh in, all the air bubbles went away, and the top of the fuel injection pump was filled with crud. And I got all that out as best I could, poured a bunch of clean diesel on top, put the top on, and then you'll see that'll probably be the last section of firing it up. Well, getting ready to fire it up, and then it fired up and it started kicking out a bunch of smoke. It took a lot to crank and a lot to get all that schmoo out of there, but once it started firing up, I revved it up, and well, she fires right up now. So I'll call this one a success. Now I just gotta fix the rest of the crap that's wrong with it. But I hope this helps. I hope this helps. Again, sorry for the crappy quality. I really did not expect this to work. This, of all the, I've worked on over 100 of these engines in different platforms, and I really accidentally became kind of, not an expert, because there's guys out there with way more knowledge than me, but kind of became a I don't know what you'd call it. This is one of the main things I work on between work and at the house. I work on these stupid things so much. Nowadays it's mostly the turboed models, but yeah, these things, I work on more of these than I care to admit. So yeah, dude, this thing's good to go. I'm glad this thing got unhooked, got unstuck, and I will be trying this with a lot of my quote-unquote junk pumps that I have sitting on a shelf, because I have a lot of them that have been stuck for the same reasons, and I'm going to later on, I'm going to do up a bench rig to try to unstick these on a bench. So good luck, guys. Hope this helps. And if you do try this, just remember, don't burn your shit down, because it's sketchy, but it works. Okay, so I didn't get the first part of it, but I think it's actually going to work. So I'm going to get a little bit of while we're doing it. Camera's a little dirty. Okay, so I am currently pumping with an electric fuel pump into the injection pump. That is about half crappy old diesel fuel, a third new diesel fuel, and denatured alcohol. So I've been pouring denatured alcohol in there and soaking it, and I took after taking the hat off, and then I took a heat gun, Harbor Freight heat gun, got it heated up as hot as I dared get it on the outside. So there's that rubber boot right over here. So it started smoking when I'd heat it, and I don't have enough room on the back side of this Hummer to go around the back side. So I started heating up right here and just letting it heat, shut it down, let it heat, shut it down. And then I started cranking it after I removed the heat, started cranking it a little bit. And then it started boiling like this on the inside. And you can tell like it kind of flows a little bit, and then it doesn't flow a little bit, and it flows a little bit. But it really starts to flow if I crank it. So I'm hoping, since it wasn't letting any in before, there was no fuel going in there whatsoever, no movement of fuel. I'm thinking I'm starting to get it, and I am actually getting fuel down. You probably see it. Let me see if I can. You see how it's all wet down there? We're actually getting fuel down at our fuel injectors are disconnected right now. I didn't want this thing firing with and actually building pressure with the alcohol in there, with the hopes that it wouldn't do any more damage. I mean, realistically, if it didn't free up, this pump was junk anyway, so I'm not that worried about it. But my hope is that once I get all that alcohol out of there and fresh fuel in there, I can actually start to get it to free up and get it to inject. So we're going to crank it a little more. Let's zoom crank it a little bit. I'm doing this by myself, so sorry if crap. I'm getting fresh, clean fuel from a fuel jug and pumping it in with a cheap, shitty electric fuel pump that I had lying around. I use for transferring fuel and trying to get shit to run. Ideally, probably a fuel injection pump would be better, but that one's a carbureted pump. But as you can see, we're definitely moving. It's pretty well cooled down now, but it's definitely moving tons of fuel into it, and it's overflowing, which is good. That's telling me that it's actually flushing out. So it's still pretty warm, but I can keep my finger. It's probably 120 degrees or so in the actual fluid, but boy, it's gross in there. Still smells like alcohol, but definitely pumping a lot of fuel into it now. Not as much as I'd like, but we'll see what we can do. I actually don't know how much. I'm not super familiar with these pumps, so this might be normal. I know when you're running, it's going to overflow at a halfway decent pace. You know, it moves a good amount of fuel into it, but I'm just cranking it a little bit, and it's also just sitting there. So I'm thinking that this might be normal. We'll find out here in a little bit. So definitely hear the electric pump changing tone when it loads up a little more and kind of unloads a little bit, but we're not moving a ton, but it's definitely enough for me to think that it's working. Anyway, all right, I'll give you another update here in a minute. Okay, so after a bunch of cranking, that was clean fuel. It's all spun up now with a bunch of goo in it, and you can't even see through it. There's a bunch of sediment coming to the top. There's a little bit of alcohol still in there. You don't want to run much alcohol through it because you'll wipe out the seals and stuff, but we're making some progress. She's farting over. I'm going to put the top back on and let her fire up and see what happens.